Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with Weighing In. We're brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. If I do that 10 more times, I won't even need to read it, Jason. Welcome back, Jason Keck. First two-time guest back-to-back, but I'm a huge dork on this NIL stuff, and we had a great talk last week, and I want to dig in more. How you been?
Good. Again, I'll say the same thing that I said last time. Exciting times when we had the podcast. The last time it was just right before July 1st. Now we're actually starting to see athletes ink deals. And it's interesting to see kind of the different areas where athletes are going, and especially specific to wrestling.
Yeah, and let me make sure I give credit where credit is due. You're a state champion. You're a college wrestling Division I wrestler. You coach Greater Heights Wrestling Club, founded that club. I think you guys have won state 16 or 17 years in a row here in Missouri. You're on the Fargo coaching staff, and we're setting all that aside, and we're talking to you today as an attorney. And so I think that's important so people can get the perspective. If you guys are watching this one and haven't watched last week, when you get time, go back. We did the sort of the 50,000 foot view last week, and I kind of want to dig into some things. Like full disclosure, I'm a financial advisor, and I've been that forever. So this kind of stuff really fascinates me. One of the places I want to start with, when you major in economics or finance, you're required to take a business law class. And one of the things I remember is the concept of offer, acceptance, and consideration. Let's start with that, Jason. Can you define those three terms for people that may not know what those mean?
Sure. Those are the basic elements of a contract. So there has to be, one party willing to offer something, give something up, or to sell something, for example, and then another party has to accept or agree to those terms. So, and then there has to be some type of consideration that each party is giving up, or that they're giving in order for there to be a legal binding contract.
So let's say, for example, you or I are selling our homes and we hire a real estate agent. Okay. So the offer, like that person, let's say I'm the real estate agent, like I'm going to charge you X percent, or it comes out of the house. You're agreeing to hire me, but I'm supposed to fulfill all of these tasks. And basically both people are doing things, like you agree to, clean up the house and do certain things. And that's all written into the contract. Is that a fairly good example of how that might work?
Sure. Like in that example, each party is giving up some type of consideration, and there is some offer and acceptance as to the terms of the agreement. Yeah.
So everybody is chiming in on NIL, on advice, on good, bad, and ugly. I saw RBY just got a contract with a chicken wing place, which is close to my heart. It's not, I looked it up. There's none in Missouri. So that ought to tell you, like, I looked it up because I was like, hey, I do keto, so I eat chicken wings way more than I should. But you've been part of this journey. I'm a lot skinnier now than I was 2 years ago. So, but that's something where, the wing company is paying either him or Barstool Sports, and, flowing through him. They're paying him some money or some sort of compensation, maybe on a chicken wing contract. We don't know. And then he is publicizing that. He's tweeting, he's Facebooking, he's Instagramming, he's talking about it. He might wear gear, all those different kind of things. Is that to use and the same thing with like AJ Ferrari and Nearfall Clothing, right? Like Nearfall made a deal with him. He's always worn their stuff, or for a long time. That's Mark and Matt Dodgen. Those guys are buddies of ours, so shout out to them. Same sort of deal, right? Is that to kind of set the groundwork for this?
Yeah, I saw Spencer Lee is doing. People have probably seen the Cameo stuff where you can have a celebrity with somebody happy birthday or give him a shout out or something like that. I saw Spencer Lee was on the Cameo platform where he was wishing, youth wrestlers happy birthday and, inviting them to Carver and things like that. And so, yeah, all those are ways that the NIL is shaping up in the wrestling world thus far.
That's an interesting one because our friend Randy Couture is on the Cameo platform, and like my dad and him are friends. So I, like in June when it was my dad's birthday, I called him. I said, "Hey man, it's my dad's birthday." I said, do I got to hit, you're going to hit me up for that Cameo fee? We were laughing about it, So,
right.
But that's a normal thing, right? Like, and, I said, if you really want me, and obviously with their friends, but with whatever the case may be. So, I want to talk a little bit about, so you've been an attorney for how many years?
Gosh, almost over 20 years.
Okay, over 20 years. And I've been an financial advisor for over 20 years. And to me and you, we talk off the air, obviously. I think that if an athlete, a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, whatever you want to call it, wants to get involved in this, there's certain basic parameters they need to get in place. We lost your camera, but hopefully you'll come back here in a second. There you go. I think number one is they need to incorporate. And I don't want this to get too boring, but basically they need to form like an LLC, which is a limited liability company, which if something goes wrong in a deal, the other side can only basically sue their company. You can't sue the person personally. Is that a very succinct way of saying that? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean the limited liability corporation or company is often a way to separate yourself from legal obligations that you wouldn't have to incur personally. And then obviously you set up a bank account, an EIN number, things like that. So you keep your financial part of it separate for tax purposes and things like that. It's just a kind of cleaner, easy way to do it.
Yeah, an EIN number is basically the equivalent of a social security number for a business, for people that may not know that. And so if we want to pay Spencer Lee, we pay Spencer Lee Incorporated or SL Inc. as an example, instead of Spencer Lee directly. There's different tax ramifications, but basically that LLC, Spencer Lee can put all of his income in there, take all of his expenses out of there, and the rest just pours through to him personally, and he adds that money to his income taxes, which leads to you need an accountant, okay? Because when you start making money, you've never made money like this before. You're making it in a new way. It's coming in through an LLC instead of just writing checks to Spencer. An accountant is important here as well, correct?
I think so, definitely. Again, it's hard to be the master of many. So, for example, I have my own law practice. I run the business side of the law firm, but I certainly don't try to do the accounting side of it. I've got Susan Cooper, a lady here that is an expert in that area of accounting, sure. And she helps lots of small businesses. She helps a lot of 501c3s and things like that. So she knows the ins and outs, and I'm just a good employee to her, so to speak, where she tells me what to do and I do it.
You're her client. I mean, just to make sure, like you're not her employee, but yeah, you pay her for advice. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you,
for sure.
Yeah, and you then use it. She's almost like your coach. I mean, for people in wrestling, she's your coach on that side of it. And then the third part is a financial advisor, like, whether it's financial advisor, financial planner, stockbroker, somebody on the investment side of things that'll say to you, okay, you can obviously just go spend all this money on gum and candy, or you can set it aside and start to accumulate wealth. And you can set it aside in taxable investments, tax deferred investments, tax-free investments, and all these have different liquidity issues and things like that. That's my area of knowledge. And so again, like, to use me as an example, if I drive and get a speeding ticket, I don't go to court and represent myself. I don't go, can we reduce this to excessive vehicular noise? Like, I hire somebody like yourself and do that. If you have a good year or normal year and you go, I want to invest this money, I want to set up a retirement plan, you can Google all that stuff, but generally you hire somebody to do that. And I think what you and I have probably both told people over the years, it's not what you know that's the problem, it's what you don't know that can cause you big problems. And so I think you're going to see a lot of people, hopefully good people, but a lot of people pop out of the woodwork and be able to say, we can help you with all of this. So I think it's important that these young men and women get a team like that. I think the most successful business model would be somebody that combines all those three and says, we specialize in NIL people, one-stop shop, you come here, and probably a fourth person that's helping them make deals, you know. And so I'd say it's Susan Cooper, Jason Keck, David Miricatani, and, you know, Joe Blow. And you come in and you get all of that for X percentage of what you make, that kind of thing. So it's important all these people are licensed. They all have experience. Like you mentioned, over 20 years of experience. Same thing for me. Probably Susan Cooper's been doing this longer than 15 minutes. Susan should probably be paying us for all the times we mentioned her name. Tell Susan like she owes me a basket of wings when I see her. So, but that kind of team structure, because now the athlete can go focus on, do I want to do Cameo? Do I want to do chicken wings? Do I want to do a gear deal? Like, we're sponsored by Nike, so maybe Nike will reach out to certain athletes. Maybe they won't. Grant Turner and I did a podcast the other day, and he talked about the lay of the land. It's so new, and Nike corporate is sort of driving those 50,000 feet decisions. You're on the legal side, so tell me what you think a good contract looks like, and to contrast it maybe what a bad contract looks like.
Well, I would say understanding what the terms are, number one.
Yeah.
So again, that's why a lot of times a legal professional is needed, because if a business is going to hire somebody to do something related to NIL, they probably got some type of legal person that's helping them out, or that's helped them put together a form contract, sure, something like that. So number one is just understanding the terms and knowing what those are. One of the things that you were talking about, I think that athletes really need to focus on is, in certain sports, the window may be shorter than other sports. And so for an athlete that's getting paid in college, that might be their most opportune time to make the most amount of money related to NIL. And, when they graduate, they get out of college, the next person, the next college athlete coming in, maybe the person that the chicken wings company wants to hire, and they don't want to have a long-term deal with the athlete. They want to keep it fresh. They want to keep the latest, hottest, athlete on the cusp for their marketing purposes. So I think that that leads into kind of the second part, is knowing the length of the contract. Are we doing this for on an annual basis? Is it multi-year? How long am I being tied to this specific company or entity? Another important part is there exclusivity? So, if I'm the chicken wing company, to use that example again, I don't want my athlete going to another chicken place and marketing and endorsing their products. I want them to be my guy or my girl. So understanding what exclusivity means, and that can be a very wide or more narrow breadth, depending upon the language of the contract.
Yeah, you said a lot there. So I'm going to work backwards. Exclusivity. So let's use the chicken wing contract, right? Because it's out there. So we obviously don't know the contract, and we're not saying it's good or bad or ugly. But the first thing is, like you said, is it just, okay, like I can't go now be endorsed by Buffalo Wild Wings, or I can't go be endorsed by, like, could I do a pizza company now that sells wings, right? Can I do a sandwich shop? You know, is it all food? Like all those kind of things. And those make a big difference because those are obviously, like if you're my exclusive attorney, but let's say your focus is not divorce, okay, as an example. And then I get married and divorced, and I signed a contract with you that you have to represent me in that, that's probably a bad decision. So this exclusivity part is super important, okay, like you're saying. You mentioned this to me off the air, and I thought it was brilliant. You said it on the air. The window of time for certain athletes, like, for example, wrestling, right, where the NCAA is this publicity machine, right? Like Flow covers it, Track covers it, Open Mat covers it, Intermat covers it, Rockfin covers it, Win covers it. All these people cover it. And people get mad at me, but people root for the laundry, right? Like there's a lot of people here in Missouri that root for the black and gold, right? There's a lot of people in Iowa that root for the black and gold. There's a lot of people in Oklahoma that root for the crimson and cream and the orange and black, you know? So because you're on these teams and in these programs, you get a certain amount of publicity. RBY is a great example. Let's say when he's done, he doesn't want to wrestle internationally. I'm not saying he does or doesn't, not saying he wouldn't be great. But let's say like he's a 133 pounder. So right now he's in between the Olympic weights, and let's say his goal is to be an Olympic champion, and he has no desire to cut to 57 and no desire to change his body to 65. This is his window. Like this is his window. And God only knows how much money he actually made by winning that NCAA final. So whereas the other side of it to me is a golfer, right? Like a college golfer, like they're not publicized a lot, but then they can go, make the PGA tour and all kinds of people are going to come after them. And then once you're out of college, NIL doesn't matter anyway, because NIL was only about not losing your eligibility. That was the whole thing. Like, there was I can't think of the kid's name, and maybe you'll know it. He was played Colorado football. He was also an Olympic, like a moguls jumper in the Winter Olympics. And they said if he took any money from the Olympic stuff, he couldn't play college football. That's kind of what this stuff breaks down. So if you're advising somebody, again, from the lawyer or attorney standpoint, what kind of things are you telling them to look for in a contract? And let's even too, like I read contracts, but I don't read them the way you do. Like, what you're reading. I read them as, I think, a pretty literate person, but don't read contracts every day for a living. If people have never read a contract, they feel intentionally confusing with all the where-to-alls and heretofores and all these other words that we never use on a daily basis. And there are these run-on sentences that are 7 lines with no commas or periods. It's taxing on your brain. So, what
for sure. So what I would recommend in those situations is an athlete can always find an attorney to review that contract and even pay them an hourly rate to review the contract. So you don't have to sign a long-term deal with an attorney and say, now this attorney is going to be my agent. Now right. This attorney is going to get, a cut off my future contracts or my future deals. But you can certainly have an attorney review the document and, you make sure that it says what you think it says. That's the number one thing. So if I was sitting down with a client, I would say, well, what do you think the terms of the agreement are? And they would verbalize those to me. And then I would make sure that that's what the contract says. And then if there was a provision in there, for example, that they didn't communicate with me, I would say, well, do you understand it says this? Do you understand it says that you can't endorse any other food product, by going with this wing company with the ongoing analogy that we've been using, that you can't go get a deal for another food endorsement, or maybe food and beverage. It may be food, beverage, and it may include candy, like endorsing Skittles or something like that.
Anything
like,
you eat or drink.
Like I said,
this is it. Yeah. Yeah. Could be
Yeah,
anything in your drink, right?
and the athlete needs to know that, because obviously they are reducing their ability to make money in those areas. So the contract needs to compensate them for that area that they're giving up.
Yeah. In our business, we call that opportunity cost, right? It's lost
For
opportunity.
sure.
Right? And that's a term
Yep.
that I don't think a lot of people apply to wrestling, but it's the same, right? Like if I stay and have you coach me, I can't go have somebody else coach me. I'm not saying it's a good or bad decision, but like if I come to Kansas City, I can't train in St. Louis the same day. I can't train in Chicago the same day. I can't train anywhere else in the world. That's an opportunity cost. Like people don't think about that. One of the things that stuck out to me is these MMA contracts. So I coach MMA fighters, and a lot of these organizations tie these guys down. Like you sign a 3-fight contract, you get X amount up front. It's show money and win money. So you and I are going to fight. It's a 500 to show, 500 to win. So we're each going to make 500, and somebody else is going to make the third 500. The cost of promoter $1,500 to put the fight on, because if you win, you get a grand, and I get half a grand, and then I get X percentage of the ticket sales. I promote events, I run events, so I understand you got to do that as a profitable model. But one of the things that these contracts have, and I know UFC fighters have complained about it, is like this exclusivity thing. Like even when their contract is up, they can't go negotiate somewhere else. They have the rights of matching. Also, like I know UFC guys have been like, they can keep me on this contract forever. There's no activity clause. Like if I'm not hurt, they don't have to promise me a fight every 6 months. So that stuff is hugely important. I actually left a gym because the guy running the gym was the promoter, was the coach, was the agent, all this stuff. And I'm like, you can't do that. You're like, what do you mean? I go, look, if you think me and Jason are a great fight because I'm going to sell 200 tickets in St. Louis and Jason's going to bring in 200 people from Kansas City, that's a great fight for you as the promoter, but you got to think one of us is the favorite. And if you think he's the favorite, you shouldn't be telling me to take this fight as a coach if I'm not ready for it yet. So there's inherent conflicts of interest. And so I think that's another thing to look for, right? Is to find out if people have conflicts of interest. Like I think about the wing deal, and maybe Buffalo Wild Wings doesn't even know who Roman Bravo Young is, right? But they probably have deeper pockets than this other company, and they certainly have a bigger reach, right? So that's, tell me your thoughts on that, on like, the exclusivity part, like digging down a little deeper, and maybe the MMA contract analogy.
Yeah, well, I think that athletes need to explore all their options, because if you jump at the first opportunity, it may not be the best opportunity, and it may curtail future opportunities, and using the RBY thing again, he may have got an outstanding deal, that would be better than what Buffalo Wild Wings could even offer him. Who knows? But sure. Again, if athletes lock down, we talk about Spencer Lee using Cameo. Well, if they have an exclusivity clause, he can't go do the same thing somewhere else, And so again, I think that these companies, they're going to try to obviously get these athletes tied to long-term contracts for the least amount of money and the highest or the greatest amount of exclusivity. So, those are all negotiating aspects of the contract that the athlete needs to really consider. And hopefully the people around him, his family, his coaches, the school itself, are guiding these athletes. I was reading an article that was talking about, one of the ways the universities could really help athletes and kind of diversify the playing field is for athletic directors to start setting up and bringing in other organizations to help mentor these athletes or provide guidance about what we're talking about, like right
consulting
here.
Firms and
Whether
lawyers.
Yeah, whether they're hiring consulting firms, or Oklahoma State, for example, is hiring those people to be part of the university staff to then guide these athletes.
Yeah. So that brings up a couple of interesting things, right? Like, let's say that you lived in Oklahoma and you can now become a part of that. It's actually worth it for you to pay them, because you get access to the kids, they like you, and now you're going to start making deals, which is going to benefit you economically. So the way the school's going to make money off of this, I would think, is they might hire you for $10. So you have a contract, offer, acceptance, consideration, but then you're now going to donate X amount of dollars to the program because you have access to the kids, and you're put in the light of, this is the guy to talk to. I wrote down a couple things while you were talking that I always like talking, you generate cool ideas. One of the things that I remember when I was recruiting that I think made a big difference is I always tell kids, like, there's an inherent conflict of interest when you get started recruiting. My job is to get you to come here for the least amount of money, and your job is to go to wherever you can go for the most amount of money. And we're going to have to land on a happy medium where we both feel like we got a pretty good deal. That's a direct comparison to what you're saying. You know, like RBY wants $100 million from the wing company, and they want to give him $100 a month gift card for free wings. So
Right.
Somewhere in the middle is where they're going to land, right? The other thing that people should know is that most of these companies, especially smaller companies, always want to pay you in product and not in cash. And then they want you to monetize the product. So, I mean, the wing one's not a good one, but like Near Fall Clothing, like they might say, hey, AJ, we're not going to give you money per se, but you have a spending allowance with us, and then you can go sell these shirts and make profit on it. Like, that's how it works. I'm not saying they have or haven't, but I mean, that's a better deal for Near Fall than it is for Ferrari, because he now has to go do more work as opposed to just getting a check. The other thing that you said, which was interesting to me, was you said if it's a good deal, right? And so what immediately came to mind to me is this: we have no idea what the terms are for the deal of Roman Bravo Young. But I guarantee you this: if we could get the third string 133 pounder at Penn State the same deal that Roman Bravo Young got, that's a great deal for that third stringer, because no one knows who that guy is. So judging the deal, the level of it's a good deal is probably one of the most nebulous but important things to figure out. And listen, you and I have talked about like wrestling dads that are crazy, wrestling dads that are chill. Everybody thinks themselves and their kid is better than they are. So like, this is terrible. I would never take this deal. We're like, hey man, no one else is offering you anything. Like, you should take this and run, versus somebody saying, Jason, you got to take this deal. You're like, I have 4 other offers. So when you think about judging the deal, and that leads to paralysis by analysis, right? Sometimes people just overanalyze stuff and can't make a decision instead of picking something and start making money, because like you said, some of these kids have a limited window.
Yeah, well, I think, we're only a week into this thing, David. So I don't even know if the athletes know what a good deal is. I don't even know.
I don't think they do.
If the agents or the people that are advising them know what a good deal is yet. And so that's the concern too, with jumping too fast and for too long, is maybe you sign a deal and it turns out 3 months from now, you look back at it and go, gosh, that was a bad deal. I should have waited, because.
To jump in real quick as an analogy. So RBY makes this deal, right? And then Dayton Fix makes a deal with Eskimo Joe's, which is a restaurant down in Stillwater. So they're not equal. I mean, Dayton has a better international resume, but the last time they wrestled, RBY won for the national title. Dayton is totally possible could get more money than Roman Bravo Young could. And then if you're RBY, you're like, I beat that guy. Like, how did I get less money? Well, Stillwater, maybe Stillwater, Oklahoma's better for opportunities. Maybe the owner of Eskimo Joe's has known his family for years, that kind of, because RBY's from Arizona, so he doesn't have long-term roots in Pennsylvania. You know, there's all these factors, like you're saying, there's no comparison. Like the opposite is the NFL rookie salary cap, right? Like these guys come in, it used to be the Wild Wild West. Like the last year was like Sam Bradford and Cam Newton when they were rookies, and they were getting more money than Peyton Manning was, or Tom Brady, which was insane. Now there's a cap, and the number 1 guy gets more than the number 3 guy, which gets more than the number 7 guy. But there's slots, there's structure. Like you said, there's no structure now. Nobody knows what anything's worth, right?
For sure. And then, you know, if the other area is, you know, what are these athletes' NIL potentials in various markets? So RBY, you know, he's got social media following. Is he going to invest his time and efforts promoting, you know, those channels? Is he going to do it with the wing company? Is he going to do it with starting his own apparel business? Is he going to do it with Cameo? And then where does the training fit in? And then where does the school fit in? And then where does, you know, the camp obligations for the university fit in? And I think that's going to be an interesting area too, is, you know, the athletes still have obligations to the school, and how are potential conflicts going to arise between their endorsement deals and what their responsibilities are to the university.
Yeah. So you brought up something else. So before I forget, the Spencer Lee deal is an interesting one if he does Cameo, because I'm sure this is not the case, but what if they said you can't post anything on social anywhere else, which would be stupid, right? Because like they need him to be out there talking about it, but like, hey, you can't do TikTok now, you can't do IG, you can't do Twitter, you can't do Facebook. That's a terrible deal unless they're paying him $1 gazillion, because, you know, there's all these other opportunities, and now nobody else can even see him to hire him to sell chicken wings, or, you know, like Hy-Vee, or, you know, these companies that are in Iowa. The second thing that crossed my mind is this. Gable Stevenson's probably the guy that is in the best position to benefit from this gigantically, because he's on the freaking Olympic team and he still has college eligibility. And I think a lot of us think he ain't coming back. But I mean, you talk about a platform where everyone's going to see you and be talking about you. And he earned it, right? I mean, he got on the team, but his earning potential is so much different than it was a month ago. You know, like if he had done this in the last quad, he couldn't have done it, you know? So that's an interesting thing. The other thing, and go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to just jump in on the Gable Stevenson thing is, so let's say he signs a deal now, and in 2 months, less than 2 months, he's now an Olympic champion.
1 month. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, you know, he inks a deal now, and it's a multi-year deal. And the next thing, you know, he's an Olympic champion. His value potentially perceivably is going to be much greater as being the best in the world versus best in the NCAAs. And so if he gets tied to a deal in this window now, but before the Olympics, then, you know, again, we talk about those opportunity costs. They could be much more significant to him versus waiting and seeing how he does in the Olympics, you know. And but again, that's the risk versus reward. He could go and lose the very first match and not be able to wrestle, you know, the rest of the tournament.
This is a perfect example. This is the perfect example. So Gable Stevenson, best case scenario, goes, wins the Olympic gold medal, walks off in the sunset, joins the WWE. He's a huge star. He's well-spoken. He's a good-looking kid. He's a minority. He's won everything at every level, and he loves the WWE. The worst-case scenario is he gets hosed in the first round of the tournament. That guy wrestles another guy. He's out, and then he's sour on wrestling, and maybe doesn't wrestle at all. But now the WWE thinks nearly not as powerful, or he goes back and wrestles and just, you know, doesn't care as much about it at Minnesota. So there's opportunity cost on both sides, right? Like if Gable bets on himself, he's like, I'm not signing until August, right? Like, I'm going to sign a contract as the Olympic gold medalist, not as an age group world champion and an NCAA champion. Conversely, if it doesn't work out, you know, it's like recruiting, right? You recruit kids based on potential. Like, that's why Shane Griffith was such a huge recruit. Like, when he was in the portal, you're like, or Max Dean, you're like, I know how good this kid is. Like, I know what they can do. I mean, Shane Griffith won nationals in the most, you know, stressful situation, you know, COVID, we're dropping the program, really good school academically, not a ton of workout partners. Like, anybody in the country would throw money at that guy, you know, for a scholarship. Because, like, why not, right? Like, he's proven himself. He's not an academic risk. He's not a social risk. He's not a behavioral risk. He's not a wrestling risk, all of it. So that's a perfect example. In
the worst case scenario for there would be to go out and not perform well at the Olympics and get hurt, you know.
Yes.
And then, you know, maybe the WWE offer isn't there. Maybe, you know, the endorsements, if he's not able to wrestle the next year or something like that, you know, again, those are all risks that athletes have to consider because a lot of times, you know, in this first few months, you know, they don't know how things are going to play out. So, you know, it's something that, again, when you go into a contract, you need to be considering all of those things.
And kids will always bet on themselves. The way they got there was by having an inordinate amount of self-belief, right? To believe you can be the best in the world, to believe you can be the best in the state, to believe you can be the best in the country. You have to believe you can do amazing things that most people can't do. Like that, you know, like that's the one thing that everybody has in common that won at that level, you know? So I talked to,
I mean, you look at Thomas Gilman, for example, you know, by him making the Olympic team, like his value for endorsements and things like that has skyrocketed compared to, you know, he never won a national championship.
Yes.
So for him, it's kind of the converse. So like his earning potential and power has increased greatly after college, where we were talking about before about the potential for it to decrease.
Yeah. And it's a perfect analogy again, because what if Vito had won? He's in college,
right?
You know, he's at a school that didn't even let him wrestle last year. You know, nice kid, well-spoken, multiracial, you know, like there's a bunch of things going on for him that are positive too. I know you and Gilman are actually friends. So, you know, with this whole family. So, I mean, but yeah, that was another really good analogy. I want to get this in because I talked to a Division II coach and he told me that one of the things you have to figure out is how you pay camp counselors. Because it used to be you had to pay counselors there had to be a criteria. And it could not be on how good you were as a wrestler. So they might say, the way most counselors or camps do it is like freshmen get this much, sophomores, juniors, seniors, you know, and then, but you could be the national champion. Like you're AJ Ferrari and I'm the third string, whatever. I'm the third string guy behind AJ Ferrari, but we're both the same age. Counselors had to get paid the same. Okay. So far the NCAA has said you can't change that. That still exists. Okay. But it'll be interesting to see how that happens as well. And there's one other contract that came to mind. It popped up this last week. If you're not a baseball fan, there's a guy that played baseball named Bobby Bonilla. Okay. You probably know this story, but he signed a 25-year deal worth like $1.2 million or something like that a year with the Mets. And at the time, everybody thought the Mets made a great deal because, you know, they weren't paying 10, 20 million a year. Well, Bobby Bonilla basically just bought his own annuity. You know, like he gets $100,000 a month for 25 years and he hasn't played in forever. And he kind of got hurt right after that. And that's a guaranteed contract. Now, the Mets, I'm sure it's annoying cutting a check that much, but it wasn't necessarily a bad deal for them. You know, it's not like, you know, like somebody that paid, like Mike Trout got huge money. And if he got hurt or something, you know, Fernando Tatis Jr. to sign a huge contract. If he got hurt, they're stuck with all that guaranteed money. But it's again, like people are now like, man, Bobby Bonilla is brilliant. They don't remember the first part of it, which was the Mets got out of a lot of upfront money, which ideally helped them sign other people.
Well, and with baseball, it's the time value of money too. Look how much the contracts have gone up.
Yes.
And what $1 million was, 25 years ago compared to what it is now, it's peanuts,
Yes.
Those guys are signing ridiculous deals.
So that's a quick thing to dork out about. So inflation is another risk with money. And so like if inflation goes up at 4% a year, your spending power gets cut in half every 18 years. So like you said, that $1 million contract then is only worth about $500,000 today. And you combine that with the inflation rate of baseball salaries is way higher than 4% a year. Like if you were the best guy and you signed a $30 million deal, the next guy's not getting 31. They're getting like 35, which is a 15-16% jump. So it's significant. So, I mean, we got about 4 minutes left. I think to summarize this from an advice point of view, again, I think we're both excited that there's opportunities out there. We're both excited that wrestlers and other non-revenue sports can benefit. Do your homework, surround yourself with smart people, look up as many previous deals as you can, make sure somebody knows how to read the contract, make sure you know how to save money for taxes. Like if you get $1,000, you're going to have to give some of that to the government. So don't just go spend it and, owe money at the end of the year plus a penalty. And if you can afford to invest some of it, because the younger you are, the more the power of compound interest works for you. Are we pretty good on that?
Yeah. And I think that one of the most important parts is communicate with your university and your coach. You were talking about the camp situation. I was talking to Brian Elam, Rocky, and Zach's dad yesterday, and we were talking about, if those guys started like the Elam brother camps working with heavyweight type kids, they're both, they have their resume speaks for itself on the
great
rest
credentials.
of that. But what are their obligations to Mizzou to be camp counselors there and for those type of camps versus what it would be if they want to do Elam Brothers camps, And so I think you need to communicate with the university and say, hey, what's my expectation? What are my obligations to help with the university? And what can I do, during that off time or that summertime for me to go out and try to make as much money as I can?
I think the one thing that's super fascinating about all of this is we're coaches, right? We both have coached for a long time. Like you kind of want your guys or girls, women, ladies doing the least amount to be distracted, right? Like go to school. If you need to, get a part-time job, wrestle, be a good student, hang out with good kids, right? Like you have a son, like if he's doing that, you're happy, right? Well, now these kids are going to start doing all this other stuff. Time management is probably, we probably won't talk about this next week, but learn how to time manage, get a digital calendar, time block, all that other stuff, because stuff gets away from all of us. So, Jason, I always enjoy.
That's where the school might be able to really help these athletes too. Because again, unless you know how to do that, you have to have some mentoring for people to tell you how to do that successfully.
I'm working with a 24-year-old on a project, and he laughed at me like 6 months ago when he saw my Google Calendar. Now he's like, now I got to put everything on a calendar. I'm like, yeah, with age comes responsibility. So I'm going to wrap it up. We're almost done here. Great conversation. Next week when I see you, you won't be dressed better than me. We'll be dressed the same. So no more big time in me. So anyway, for Jason Keck, I'm David Mirikitani. We thank you guys as always for watching, listening, and sharing. We'll speak to y'all next week.